My name is Powell Kinney. I'm the Chief Product Owner for the Mobility Services Platform at Toyota Connected. I do a lot less coding than I used to, but when I do, you can find it on GitHub, mostly around GIS, things around Elixir, and things like that. I want to start real quickly just talking about Toyota Connected, more about what we're working on, kind of introduction to what we're doing, before we kind of get into more of the development side. Our CEO of Toyota Motor Corporation, Akio Toyoda, at CES this year announced kind of part of his vision was changing Toyota from a automobile, transitioning from an automobile company to a mobility company. And really it's about changing from just the manufacturing of cars to actually focusing on moving people from A to B, whether that's across the room, across town, across the country. Going back in Toyota's history, Toyota's done this transition before. 80 years ago, Toyota was a loom manufacturing company, so making machines that made fabrics. And that's where it got its start. And 80 years ago, Kiichiro Toyota changed from that to automotive. But at the same time, he brought a lot of what Toyota had done well in the manufacturing space into the automotive manufacturing. In fact, if you look today at manufacturing in general, almost all the lean manufacturing processes, a lot of the most efficient practices came from Toyota. So they've kept that manufacturing expertise. And when we move into this next stage of moving to this mobility company, obviously we want to bring the same things. What this really means for Toyota and specifically for Toyota Connected is all of a sudden it's not just about the hardware in the car, it's about the software and the platforms that run with that car. So you'll hear, and I'll talk a little bit too, he's transitioning to a platform company. So when we talk about moving people, there's a whole component of that that's driven by cloud software, by modern software, outside of the vehicle. Mobility is a really big word. It means lots of different things. We look at it as 20 years ago, really the only option we had was personal vehicle ownership. You had to have a personal relationship with a car, and that means that it's your car all the time. If it's not being driven by you, it's probably not being driven. And so the next step in that towards kind of this mobility future really is car sharing. So today, if you have a car, you drive to the grocery store to get your groceries. You come back home, the car sits in the driveway until the next time you need to go get groceries. Car sharing, you go get a car, go to the grocery store, come back, and then while you're not using it, someone else can use it. So all of a sudden the utilization of that car is important. But that also has an inherent software component. There has to be a way to coordinate that flow of who actually owns a vehicle, who's using a vehicle a certain amount of time. And so that's what we've started with. But the ultimate example of where we're heading is what Akio Toyoda calls autonomous, so the combination of vehicle autonomy with mobility as a service. So no longer that you're going out to get a vehicle, driving it yourself to get the groceries. Maybe when it's time for you to get your groceries, the vehicle comes to you, picks you up, goes to the grocery store. While you're shopping for groceries, it goes and delivers a couple packages for Amazon as one of our sponsor, our alliance partners. Or Pizza Hut, maybe it's out delivering pizzas while you're in the grocery store. Or better yet, maybe it just brings the grocery store to you. But there's a continuum, there's a spectrum from kind of where we are now out to this vision of the future. And it really depends on us changing from that software mentality of building one specific software to satisfy one specific use case. We could do that for mobility. We could build an entire software platform just to do car sharing, and another one to do ride hail, and another one to do fleet management. But we really see that as one problem set. And so in order to build that out, not just build as individual pieces, I want to start building a platform for Toyota to run these types of operations on. And that's where we come up with the Mobility Services Platform. This has been in various stages of developments for a while. Toyota Connected started working on it a little over a year ago. And it is the global platform for supporting car share, supporting ride share, whatever these different modalities are, all the way out to autonomous, this e-pallet future. And really the idea is that this isn't one platform right now. We'll change it. We'll do a new thing before we get to wherever we're going with autonomy. Instead, we want to build one platform that creates a single user experience for everyone. So today, however I'm going to get in my car, in the future when all of a sudden the car can come and get me, that user experience doesn't necessarily change. And we see that as kind of an extension of Toyota's experience of driving and the in-the-car experience with the experience outside the car. And that's really what Toyota Connected was created to do. So while Big Toyota is working on this transformation, Toyota Connected was founded in 2016 as a global data innovation company. So we have lots of different products within the company, mobility services platform being one. We have a big data center that works on vehicle data, creating products off of data from our vehicles. And we've got other innovations and natural language processing, all these other kind of things within the company. Really focused on how does Toyota become a leader in building software and building software products that actually impact customers' lives and take the information that we're able to get and make our customers' lives better. And I won't go too much into this, but it's definitely doesn't look like what you expect from another OEM. We want to make that environment that attracts AI experts, natural language experts, front-end mobile developers, big data experts, anything we can to get really good in-house expertise on building these kinds of products. So we started one in Plano, Texas. This was in 2016. And then in April of this year, we started an office here in London. So we've got an office in King's Cross. And we have some of the folks from that office are here. The other thing that Toyota does really well, and this goes back to what we were talking about, taking what Toyota did well in manufacturing, what's made Toyota successful up to this point, and making sure that we don't forget that, and we bring it with us, and is really about the process of developing software. If you ever go to a Scrum training, if you go to Agile training, typically at some point in time they're going to tell you Toyota did this, Toyota started this. So the TPS, the Toyota Production System, Kaizen, all of those sorts of things came out of Toyota. And so we really think we should be pretty good at this. Should be something that we're good at taking those things we do when we manufacture cars and apply them to manufactured software as part of our legacy. Just to give you an example of one of the products where you would see Elixir in the wild from Toyota. Surfco is our distributor in Hawaii. And about a year ago, they came to us wanting to provide mobility options for people living in Honolulu. And so they brought that local expertise. We worked with them, and actually really quickly, in about 3 weeks, we gave them their first application using that agile little bit by little bit methodology. It didn't do much, but it got them started, and we've released a new version of the app to them every week since then. 6 weeks after we started that, we actually had unlocking cars and actually people using the software to take a car, go across the island, and things like that. All iOS, Android, Ember for our front end, and then Elixir in the back end. And so small in-house team, developers. Since then, we've been working with them, and actually they launched in July with their Hui, or Drive Hui car share service in Hawaii. And it's been going really well. And again, going back to that platform, that we could have spent our time building that as a single app. I think if we'd come in and just said, this is our only product we're going to build, we could have worked on that. But instead, we wanted to make that transformative step to get us from kind of this car sharing, this one first step, something you might call the hello world of mobility. That's the first thing that you want to do for mobility, to prove out that, we can change who actually gets access to this vehicle. And so we built that on top of this platform, and now we've got this one use case. We've got this out in a few other countries around the world are in different stages of launching programs on this. But when you look at Toyota, what Toyota wants to do with this, it's much, much, much bigger. And so lots and lots of different things when we look at a company like Toyota and the global scope that it has and the global footprint it has and what that means for mobility. So how do we take a team or a team or approach that was able to build an application and the beginnings of a platform for one use case and start to expand that out? And I had a lot of thoughts about this and tried to put them into, we're about Toyota Production System. This is a poorly replicated version of what Jeffrey Liker has in his book, Toyota Way. But really it boils down to kind of three pillars within Toyota's production system. To be honest, Toyota Production System has been out a long time. There's lots of different visuals of it. So there's a triangle, there's an upside down triangle, lots of different ways to look at it, but just really taking a few liberties, want to look at the three kind of main pillars, which is just-in-time, people and teamwork, and technology with a human touch, or JIDOKA. So just starting just-in-time, this is something most of us are familiar with. We know what just-in-time compilers do. We have that terminology within our space. Just-in-time for Toyota really means getting the right amount of parts, in the manufacturing sense, gets the right amount of parts, the exact right amount of time. And that is all focused on eliminating waste. So if I get too many parts and I can't use them, that's waste. They're sitting there, I'm paying for for floor space for those. If you look at the mass manufacturing, and I'm going to make 100,000 cars in my plant, so I get a shipment of 100,000 engine blocks. Then it turns out 20 in, I realize there's a manufacturing defect. Well, that's 90,000, 100,000 engine blocks that I have to replace. So there's a lot of waste when you start doing more, getting more parts than you necessarily need. When we look at this in other contexts, what ends up looking like a lot of times is what we call a PDCA cycle, or Plan, Do, Check, Act. Most of us do this. In fact, I think lots of different forms of this. Even in the U.S. military, there's forms of militaries around the world, forms of this in different organizations. But in the end, it's we plan, we think about what we're going to do, we go ahead and do it. We have some measure that we can use to check as to the success of our hypothesis, and then we change that. If you look in the software development world, if we just take Scrum, for instance, we all do this in a sprint. So we plan, we have our plan at the beginning, we've got our do where we actually do software, actually do the coding. We have a check where we make sure that at the end everything looks like it was supposed to look, and then we make some plan or some retrospective for the next time we go through the cycle. Within that, when we're actually doing software development, we're doing this on each individual feature. So we're looking, hey, I've got an idea of how we're going to build this feature. We go and try it. We have our ways of testing whether this feature was successful. So we do this lots and lots of times, even within the context of a sprint. And even smaller than that, as developers, we're constantly doing this. And it's interesting to look at development in the sense of these very, very small PDCA cycles. And if you look at what Toyota Production System and most of these things try to do, the whole goal is to get that PDCA cycle as small as possible. So if you think about the mass manufacturing, that's a whole year's worth of PDCA. I'm going to plan for 100,000 vehicles. At the end of the year, I'll figure out if it's useful or not. We don't want that. We want to constantly be changing, constantly be adapting. In many industries, there's a time scale of this that might be on the order of weeks or maybe months. And this really establishes that heartbeat. Software development might be unique, and I'm not still thinking through a lot of this, but in software development, you can have both developers that have a week-long PDCA cycle where they're planning things out, they're drawing up, they're architecting a solution, they're spending a couple days building it, maybe they spend a couple days testing it, and at the end they decide, oh, that was successful or not successful, or what to do the next time. But you can also see developers that have PDCA cycles on the order of seconds. So if you ever watch really fast developers, you'll see that they're as they're going through and making new functions or adding new functionality, they're constantly thinking about, okay, how am I going to test this? They're putting little log statements or debug statements. And so you see people developing on this now all of a sudden where you can plan for the side effects of your code as you're writing that code, and all of a sudden from going from maybe days of a PDCA cycle to maybe seconds. And I think that might be unique for our industry, that a lot of other industries where they're focused on these kind of cycle times can't really get that fast. And probably the best example of this is maybe front-end development. Front-end development's had the chance, they've had inspectors. We use Ember for a lot of our front-end development at Toyota Connected, and Ember gives you a great inspector. So I can try something and almost immediately see the effect of it. And most of my time in that PDCA cycle is really the browser reloading. And that's pretty game-changing, because I can change things, I can see the action, and I can get that PDCA cycle really, really, really fast. And if you look at really good front-end developers, really good developers that have those kind of tool sets, you'll see this, that they're constantly checking their work. It's not put a whole bunch of effort into it, mass manufacture a whole bunch of different functionality, and then go and test it. It's really finding the absolute smallest little piece you can do. And fortunately, we actually are one of the few languages within Elixir or Erlang that we actually have this kind of tooling already for us. We can pull up an observer, I can make a small change, I can see how that affects the structure of my supervision tree, I can see how that affects certain processes, I can go in and poke at it. So we actually have a little bit of an advantage when we're using Erlang or Beam-based languages, because we can introspect into that very quickly. And I think that's one thing we've noticed within Toyota Connected as we've been using this is as developers get more and more comfortable with the tooling within this, they're actually able to see this cycle time start to speed up. And if really one of our advantages of being software developers is that we have this huge, many orders of magnitude variation in how our cycle times. This is one of those great tools that gives us a chance to do that. A couple other things that we're using along the same lines. We've been starting to use GraphQL for a lot of our messaging around our platform. And really for us, what this means is we can add additional items in real time. We can change the that API can do without affecting the downstream, without having those downstream effects you might have if you're changing different type of APIs. So we're playing around with this. We're trying to figure out how do we use this outside of our team, and to really help us look at that just-in-time API development using something like GraphQL. So that's one. Go to the other side of the TPS house here and talk about technology to human touch. There's a term called Jidoka. And there's a bunch of things within that. If you ever hear Pokeyoki and things like that that are coming from that manufacturing side, those all fit into technology to human touch. In the manufacturing space, a lot of this times this means not using technology just for technology's sake. So a new SCADA system in your plant, if it doesn't actually make lives of or make the workers' lives better, makes it easier for them to do things, makes it safer for the workers, or makes the quality of the product better, then maybe we're just doing adding technology for the sake of technology. Instead, Toyota has an approach with technology which is more about how it affects the humans. And really, we have those kind of models within software development. If you look at the big, giant picture of all the platform we want to build, one way to look at that, maybe a more enterprise way to look at that, is let's split that up into as many little chunks as we can, as many little verticals as we can. And that'll allow us to control each individual step of that vertical. So looks great. It's basically separation of concerns. This is the kind of thing you see in enterprise. You have a database team, and you have an API team, and you maybe have an infrastructure team. But works really well for the services folks who know that, hey, database is always going to work. It's just going to be there for us. Where it starts to fall down is when we really start to care about the end human that starts using these systems. So the database folks may not really understand why the API needs this particular performance. And we try to break that down, right? I mean, a lot of what we focus on in agile software development is cutting through all of that, building cross-functional teams, getting to the point where we can actually say everybody knows what the end product is going to, what the end effect to the customer is going to be, what that customer value is going to be. The other things we use for that human touch, there's the term Genshi Gumbutsu, which means go and see, or you'll see Gemba, which is kind of real place, real time. And it's really about experiencing what the end user is going to experience, or really going and seeing what at least from our side, it's almost eating your own dog food. It's making sure that, hey, I understand what the system's going to do. We have, for instance, it's our first car sharing project was in Hawaii. It wasn't particularly hard to get developers to go to Hawaii to see it. But when they're there, this is their form of transportation. They're really, to be honest, this is probably the best form of transportation in Hawaii right now, is getting a car and driving it, which makes a very, very visceral. This needs to work. It needs to not lock you up when you're on the North Shore. It needs to make sure that it's stable. But it really gets people out there going and seeing this real thing, using the system. Even the cars we have within Toyota Connected in our home office in Plano, Texas, people are using those cars daily to go get lunch, or some people are taking them home if they want an extra car for the weekend or whatever. But it's getting that Genshi Gumbutsu of actually going and seeing this thing in action, and how important that is for understanding and having that empathy for the user. The last one for the human touch, and I'll just tease this, Andrew Bennett, who's one of our developers, actually I think 3 developers speaking at ImbraConf this year, he's going to talk about sustainable testing. I don't want to do too much, but really part of that human touch and going to the product is we kind of believe that testing should start where the system ends. So as opposed to spending a lot of time focusing on individual unit tests, which are valuable and we should do that, we also should be looking at things like property testing or model-based testing. And he'll talk a little bit about our experience with Conqueror. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Someone else probably knows better. Some of the property testing libraries out there. But he'll present that in Bellevue this year. So last kind of part of my somewhat rough estimation of the TPS house is the people and teamwork side. And most agile development talks about having T-shaped developers or T-shaped team members, which is basically means that you have experience in everything, but you have one thing that you really, really focus on. And this isn't really true. I mean, most of us don't have just one thing. Maybe we all I think that we could have just one thing, focus on OTP for the rest of our lives. That's the only thing we're good at, and we'll kind of know the rest of this stuff. That's not really true. Maybe a pie-shaped developer is a little more common. We have more than one thing. We're in London, so maybe a wicket-shaped developer is even more common. But in reality, most people look like this, and I think this came off of Heinrich Kinberg from Spotify, but a comb-shaped developer, a broken comb-shaped developer. But this is more like what most of us are. We have different pieces of experience. We have different pieces of skill sets that we can bring to the table. And we have certain places where we don't have that experience. Maybe we understand just enough. The breadth is very important. I think that perspective piece, I'll talk about perspective in a second, perspective of understanding where the breadth is and what the things that I might need to know, understanding what things that I'm not as good at. But really we end up building teams out of these kind of comb shapes of different skill sets and different expertise. And one thing we've started to look at within our teams, this is just brand new in the last month or so, within our team, is taking this and let's start actually quantifying it. Let's start looking at, hey, this is Frank here, whose name I've changed to protect the innocent. But the idea is we within a team, we can know what the skill sets are, what we actually think we need to know to accomplish a problem. And Frank can kind of self-assess or work with his teammates to assess where the areas that he's particularly good at. And then combine that with maybe the larger team. This is it's a developer at our office named Ross Edmond who put this together originally. But the idea is that there's areas that the team has to be able to have within this cross-functional team. We need to be able to have this expertise. And understanding that as a team, understanding where the gaps are, understanding where each person is, and being very honest, and having that perspective about what you're really good at, what you're maybe not so good at, means that these teams can self-organize and start creating teams that fill these gaps. This is really dynamic. This changes over time. Obviously, developers get more skills. We start to learn more. We start to learn from certain areas. Or even, we start to see things that are maybe new things come up. Maybe all of a sudden, hey, we need to work with Kafka. And, well, no one here has experience with Kafka. So do we go and find another team member, bring them on, and has expertise? Do we work on learning those pieces? But it gives that kind of perspective. And this ends up being really important for how we look, what we look for on our team members. Also with Toyota, I think we all kind of look for this within people that we work for, and they're not competing, but they're two kind of sides of maybe the same coin. Beyond just being a kind of a normal person, someone you're willing to hang out with all day, we look at people who have perspective. So understanding these kind of tools, understanding that there are places maybe that one, we don't know everything. That's okay. We are probably wrong every once in a while. We always ask, when we do, one of the questions we ask when we do interviews of folks, and I've done for a while, is tell me about a time you were just absolutely wrong. And pretty much all of us in this room have been wrong at some point in time. All of us responded to it differently. Some of us responded to it in a positive way. Some people may still be in denial about being wrong on some things, but everybody here has done something wrong, different scales of wrong. But having that perspective, and the perspective that comes with that, of having to admit your mistake, having to walk through that process of, yeah, man, I was really really adamant that this was the solution, and it turns out it wasn't. And having to understand that is very walking this process is part of that maturing process as a developer, as a professional. So perspective, sometimes we call that humility or just being humble. It depends on kind of the context, but same thing. Understanding where this solution fits in. You look at car sharing, for instance. We're all excited about the software for car sharing. That's the new flashy thing. But if you think about it, there's a lot more that has to happen with car sharing than just software. Software is just part of the tool set. And we talk maybe it's 5% of what we actually need to do to run a successful car share company. But that takes a bit of that perspective and a bit of that humility within us as software developers that think we create everything. It's all about how good the software runs, and going from a 200 millisecond response time to 180 millisecond response time, that's going to be the key to making it successful. And really, there's a lot more that has to go into this. But having that kind of perspective is extremely valuable. We understand what's core, what's important, what's not. That by itself is great. But the other side of that we say is, humility or perspective is really about knowing what you don't know. Curiosity is that force that forces us to actually go and figure those things out, not sit in our box. Looking at that enterprise kind of layout of horizontals, where the folks in the database, there's no need to necessarily go outside of that and learn more. We want to create teams that want to learn that. When a new skill set comes up, they want to learn that. I think obviously being involved in this community, being here with looking out and trying to find new languages and new experiences, I think it speaks to everybody's curiosity here. I think that's why we embrace new languages and embrace new ways of doing things. And I think what I'd like to encourage is to focus on that perspective piece, to focus on when we think about the actual solutions we're building, what are the different pieces that are actually required outside of the software, outside of maybe even our slice of the software? Understanding what we don't know, which is extremely valuable within a team because it gives you a chance to find ways to grow with your team. I think we're all about to get a little bit of perspective, hearing some very smart folks today about things that maybe we didn't know about. But that's part of this growth process and part of the software development process. Finally, on the subject of people, we are hiring. We've got talked to the folks out there, but big data engineers, lots more than just Elixir. We've got a lot of great folks, great spots here in London we're trying to fill. So please come and talk to Anisha, talk to some of the folks out there, or check out toyotaconnected.eu. And thank you to CodeSync and the Code Elixir team and our Erlang Solutions for having us out here. I guess that's it. I guess we'll open up for any questions. Thank you.
So if you have any questions, raise your hand and I will run to you. Actually,
Hi, thank you for the talk. What was the main point, the main reason, or to choose Elixir as a backend platform for the car sharing solution?
I think I've had experience in previous companies using Elixir. Came from a connected car startup where we had started to integrate that just from a performance perspective. So we ran into some things around doing math. We were Node.js primarily, and we ran into some things doing math and only having one thread and issues with that, especially in GIS. And so we started to play around with other concurrency models, and Elixir came up there. When we started at Toyota Connected, that was kind of one language we knew was to get started. We used that as our starting point.
anyone else?
Thank you for the talk. Could you talk a bit more like in terms of the software security, how if you look into it, how you integrate security in your platform?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for what we can't talk about, we obviously have a very strong security first mindset within Toyota, not just from a safety perspective, the individual car safety, but also being responsible for the software around moving people. It's obviously a big concern. So we have a strong security team within Toyota Connected that works with us. We work with, we're down the street from Toyota Motors North America, so they obviously have a very strong security team as well that we work with. So we practice, the privacy by design, we practice security by design, those sorts of things as well as kind of the other best practices that come with being inside of Toyota.
Oh, so I'll come back.
Hi, are you using Phoenix for the API? And also, have you had any problems with Elixir you've had to work around?
Yes, we are using Phoenix. We use Phoenix both for the API side, for serving the web application, the mobile application. We use a lot of Phoenix channels, so our web application is pretty much all Phoenix channel driven. We've started to actually even use the pub sub layer outside of Phoenix, so we're not necessarily using it for just the coordination between clients. So we're using it for even within our cluster with some of the backend stuff of just that having that pub sub built in has been great. Problems we run into, we haven't run into any real problems, to be honest. Nothing that's causing the issues. I mean, besides the typical, we're probably using things wrong and we learn that we're using things wrong and so we fix it. Nothing particular has come up that's specific to Elixir or Phoenix or anything like that. We've been very happy with it. It's been rock solid, stable for everything we've been running for the last year or so.
Hey, I'm wondering for the app UI, if it was built before the platform supported a solution for car sharing, or if it was the other way around. So first the platform was built and then UI, or first building UI to find out what are the problems.
That's a good question. A bit of both. And part of us practicing that just-in-time mentality is that the team was actually one team. So the mobile developers were working with the platform developers. The only difference of making that platform is having that mindset of, okay, you're not the only person that's going to end up using this, so how do we build it in a more generic way? We've learned a lot from that, using that experience, both for the applications we're building now, pieces of the platform that we didn't, at the time when we started, again, thinking that software, we know everything about everything you're going to need for car share, things that we just didn't understand. Now having that application in people's hands has been giving us the feedback we need to build a more robust, more capable platform along the way. So it's definitely not one before the other. I think that the things we did correctly along the way were about doing both at the same time, of building just enough platform to support the app, building the app just enough to kind of measure that next step, come back and build the platform to support those features.
Come in. Just a second. You might not need the microphone.
On the topic of measurement, all right, fair enough. Okay. On the topic of measurement, what are you using for metrics?
A lot of it is around usability. So we do some usability testing within. So if we're focused on that, if you go to our website, the mission of Toyota Connect is freeing people from the tyranny of technology. And really the only way to measure that is to actually put technology in front of somebody and see how do they react to it. That's a lot of our metrics. We do have some business metrics that are important to the customers that are using the system. So how easy is it for someone to go from sign up to actually getting into a car? That's a very big metric for us. We want it to be fast and seamless. How much does it drive traffic back? So if we're if the success mobility programs is a lot of times built on utilization. So those kind of metrics, they're a little bit farther removed from the technology, but what we're working on is being able to draw that line of what are the actual technology things we can do that affect how fast I can get into a car, or affect how pleasant the experience is using the application. We work pretty hard to try to find those threads, but I can't say I don't think we have any specific measurements at the service level that tell us success at the customer level. I think it's the other way around a bit.
Okay, next one.
Hi, thanks for the talk. You've shown us this diagram with the skills of different team members that were overlapping. How do you go about measuring those skills?
It's a great question. We're still working on that. I think self-assessment, to be honest, if we have the developers with perspective, part of that is also trusting the perspective of our developers. So if they come and say, hey, I'm a 9 at Postgres, kind of have to trust that because that's the person that's developing the code that's going to end up running the system. If we've gotten the right types of people, we've built the right culture, those become more and more honest. One thing today we're pretty clear on, we try to be very clear on, is we want to separate your assessment of yourself and how and that from necessarily, it's not a manager's tool. In other words, it's not a matter of saying, well, that guy is a really small area and why is he even on the team? That's not the point. I think it could be construed that way, but that's not the point. Most of it's self-assessment, most of it's team assessment. And our team, to be honest, I think the teams that have started looking at that have done a good job of being very honest about that. And mostly because it's finding places where they want to grow or you want to learn more or want to improve. As long as we have that constant curiosity behind it, then having a self-assessment that's a certain way is fine because you know that you're going to improve. We know that's going to improve over time.
All right, thanks.
Okay, so I've got a message box of 3 people, so I'll try not to forget. So, 1.
I recall from a conference talk last year that you were using Kafka with Gen Stage Consumer. I was wondering if you're still using that and if there are any tips or whether you feel like you want to change to something else.
That's a good question. I think Matthew's speaking again at Elixir Conf, so I think he's going to talk about that. We still use Kafka to get to kind of that inter-product communication among Toyota Connected. And as far as I know, I believe we're still using the Gen Stage setup for that. But you can always reach out to Matthew and ask him to on Slack. So,
Thank you. Okay, almost there. I'll cut through here. Thank you.
Thank you. Really interesting. You talked a bit about that you are downstream of Toyota US for security and all. How do you, for deployment, do you and all your operational stuff, do you rely a lot on the rest of Toyota IT, or do you build your own stuff?
So Toyota Connected is actually not part of. It actually reports up to Toyota Motor Corporation. We're a cousin, I guess, of Toyota Motor North America. So it depends on where we're deploying the system. So for instance, Toyota Connected Europe here work a lot with Toyota Motor Europe, and so a lot of the deployments work with those teams. It's really, I get to tease yet another talk that Gerald Unruh is talking about our deployment strategy at Elixir Conference here as well. So, but we try to run things as much as we can ourselves. We do rely on the areas of expertise that Toyota has more broadly. We definitely absolutely rely on that. But at the end of the day, the pager call goes to someone from Toyota Connected, so we need to make sure we understand all of that, and that we have that expertise in-house.
Okay.
My question goes back to metrics. So I was wondering if the metrics that you've shown were example metrics or the metrics that we actually use. And if these are the metrics that you use, I'm particularly curious about the culture metric, and is it the alignment of personal ideal culture of the team and the actual team culture or company culture? What do you mean by culture?
That's a good question. Those were faked up, obviously, to just for the purpose of this talk. The culture piece is extremely important to us. I think from a metrics, I don't think we're measuring people as they are anti our culture or pro our culture. But you can definitely find it in any company. You can find standard bearers of that kind of culture. So identifying those people and identifying when, it's the folks that when things are going wrong, people can look to and say, okay, well, how are we going to respond to this? Or, when that gap in knowledge comes up, who are the ones that are really spearheading? Let's get together, let's learn this, and are exemplifying exemplifying that culture that we look for, of that curiosity and that perspective, and the other parts of kind of our culture. Very, very hard to measure. That's why I'm glad we do self-assessments. I don't have to measure it. But it's definitely not the idea that we have people that are not within that culture. You don't get to this stage or get to the point of having this type of tool unless everyone's kind of in alignment.
All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Powell.
Thank
Round
you.
of applause.